What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another Angle of Pursuit podcast, your fantasy football, sports betting, and NASCAR home here at fakepigskin.com. I am your host, Kyle Robert. You follow me on Twitter at NotoriousKRO. With me once again, it's Brian Twining. What's up, Brian?
What's up, Kyle? I mean, it finally happened, but who the hell would have thought that one move would have such a drastic effect, not only in terms of real life football, but the shockwaves it's sent through rankings and everything else and projections for the 21 fantasy football season.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like we've been rumoring on Twitter for a couple months now, and the player Brian's talking about is Julio Jones finally getting moved. And as a Tennessee Titans fan, I'm very excited. I felt like there was a lot of cookie crumbs going that way about a month or two ago. But as a lifelong Titans fan, I did not want to get excited. I didn't want to put the cart before the horse. And I was totally imagining him ending up in Baltimore, ending up somewhere else. And
should have went to New England.
350 attempts going to A.J. Brown and nothing to anybody else because we didn't have any receivers. Now I'm waiting for Jamison Crowder to get cut, and this offense will really come into form. Maybe O.J. Howard as
that would be lovely.
Him and Derrick Henry are obviously college teammates. But yeah, Brian, we obviously hit on our quarterback rankings on one of our first shows. We're going to talk some receivers. We're going to talk some running backs, and we're going to talk about this trade and kind of how does this affect the pieces? How does this not only affect Julio, but how does this affect Ryan Tannehill at quarterback? How does this affect Derrick Henry? What are we doing with A.J. Brown? What does that mean for our rankings at receivers and at running backs? And we're going to kind of hit on as much of that as we can. As with quarterbacks, this is an early look. We're trying to put the cart before the horse, trying to get excited, trying to put our rankings out there. Obviously, as stuff happens, we're going to try and make adjustments. We're going to try and update things. So this is just an early look at our top 12. We'll try and pencil in something a little more concrete as June rolls along, and hopefully get something up on fakepigskin.com to give you guys some official rankings. But Brian, let's jump into it, and I'll throw out my receivers first. And then I'll have you go with yours. But for me, receiver was really tough. And obviously I honestly think it was the top four guys, like if you put them in any order, I would not be baffled. Tyreek Hill, DeAndre Hopkins, Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs are that top four. A.J. Brown could have been in that conversation before the Julio trade. And I'll kind of, we'll kind of work through that as we roll through our rankings. But Brian, is there anyone else for you that should be in that conversation for that top four? Because I really feel like, and we're banking, okay, Devontae is going to be catching passes from Aaron Rodgers. If that changes, then obviously his ranking will change. But for me, it's really those four guys and then a clear drop off to the next group.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure everyone is going to have some combination of those four dudes, because even with the most recent departure of Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley, with almost nothing else around him. I mean, Mike Davis is taking over. He's thunder thighs, but I mean, he's never been one to show that he is a legit like RB1 in fantasy and or in real life.
Despite Twitter wanting to make him like the RB1 at some
yes.
point.
Now he is the guy. Every down, every crucial target is going to be looked. Matt Ryan's going to have to look his direction. So I think he kind of stays where he is, like at the middle tier of that top end, because there will be a cap on him with how bad this team's going to be, and with teams kind of solely focusing on him. You'll see.
Let's talk about Ridley for a second, because he was the wide receiver 4.5 point scoring last year, ahead of Justin Jefferson, ahead of DeAndre Hopkins, ahead of DK Metcalf. Are we selling him short? I mean, I have him at 5. So like, I obviously think he's really talented, and I'll throw up your rankings here in a second so you can see where Brian has him. But I guess we have to figure out, because Matt Ryan had 626 attempts last year, the most in the NFL. If we expect that, there's always some regression, but if this team is as bad as we think it can be, and they're going to need to throw like they did last year, and they're approaching or eclipsing 600 attempts, I mean, is there a conversation that Calvin Ridley is closer to the top 4 than the rest? And is there another conversation that maybe he should be in consideration for that number 1 overall spot among wide receivers?
I guess you could say that if this was the same offense as last year, but the guy who Julio got traded to is now their former offensive coordinator is now the head coach there in Atlanta. And I think his system of offense kind of being predicated on the running game and running more of that play action, hitting the intermediate passes down the field. I think the efficiency for Ridley will probably still be there among the league leaders in yards per reception and all that last year. But when you look at what Ryan Tannehill's done, I mean, only 481 attempts last year, but I mean, he threw 33 touchdowns. That's fantastic, but it was only 3,800 yards. So that's not saying that this Atlanta offense is going to be able to be anywhere near as efficient as Tennessee's because they don't have Derrick Henry, but right. I do think you're going to see a decrease in the amount of times that Matt Ryan is dropping back to pass. I think you're going to see less of them having to kind of speed up games because I think the game plan for Atlanta will be more to keep the games closer because their defense is likely not up to par with their offense yet. So I think where he is kind of indicative of the new offense and his skill set as a receiver. Had it been this year, had we been in the same situation this year as we were last year, I think Calvin Ridley is definitely would have a great argument to be in that top 3, top 4 conversation.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. What do we expect Atlanta to be? Obviously, the Kyle Pitts edition is something, and Mike Davis, and how does that all impact? And Arthur Smith, as a Titans fan who watched him last year, was very sad to see him go at the end of the season. But good on him to get a head coaching gig. Will be interesting to see. I think there is still a ton of passing upside. I still expect Matt Ryan to be north of 550 attempts, somewhere in that, at least top 10, if not top 5 in terms of attempts. Maybe they dial it back a little bit. But I'm optimistic about Ridley, and he wasn't necessarily somebody I was clamoring for in previous years. But I think there's enough questions and enough concern about what that offense could look like, how effective Kyle Pitts could be, and just enough to put him in kind of that second tier. But volume is king, and that's so important, and that's why Tyreek Hill and DeAndre Hopkins and touchdown Devontae Adams. And that's also part of my Devontae Adams concern is so much touchdowns last year. I expect regression from Rodgers if he stays in Green Bay, which, I guess is part of why I have him still in that top tier because he's just so damn good week to week. And, but I do have questions. So, let's throw up your rankings and we can talk about the impact on AJ Brown because AJ Brown is in an interesting case. Obviously, from a pure volume standpoint, it probably decreases with Julio Jones. But with Julio Jones on the other side, that just brings enough attention and enough concern that while his volume, maybe he's 115 targets instead of 150, but the one-on-one opportunities, the less shaded safety side, like there's going to be, I think, better options for him and more quality coming his way that, he should still have an incredible season, and there's no reason to doubt him this year.
Yeah, I had a really tough time trying to rank AJ Brown, just kind of with the addition of Julio. It does change, I guess, the perception of what AJ Brown's ceiling would be to a certain degree, because now you have this other alpha dog out there on the other side. But I really don't see them transitioning this offense to a 1A, 1B type wide receiver role. I think Julio, they're going to be using him, more so in spots. He's clearly shown over the last couple of years that he is not, he can't stay healthy for a full 16 games, and that's been an issue for him for the last handful of seasons. So they're not going to want to run him out there and give him 15 targets. So AJ Brown is still going to be the number one guy, and with, like I mentioned, Ryan Tannehill's efficiency, 33 touchdowns on just 481 attempts. That's fantastic with only 7 INTs. I think you're going to see a similar year out of Tannehill and AJ Brown. For what it's worth, like you said, teams can no longer just roll coverage to his direction and only his direction. So I think you'll see a lot more one-on-one opportunity, and he has a better chance this year too to have more boom games.
Yeah. Let's talk about Tannehill for a second, because I think that will dictate a lot of what we do with the Titans receivers. I'm optimistic that they take a step forward in terms of what the passing game looks like. I was expecting it last year, obviously did not get it. Obviously, in terms of production, in terms of efficiency, amazing, but the attempts were not there. Bringing in Julio to pair with AJ Brown, I still think there is a move or two, but Josh Reynolds is there. We'll see what that is. We'll see what they do at tight end. Ferkser was fine last year, can make a few plays, but like Tannehill was 480 attempts. I think 500 should be his floor this year. And 520, 530, I think is very reasonable. I know that's a big step forward, but I don't think you go out and get Julio Jones and just do the same thing you've done for 2 years. I think they've seen what happened against Kansas City and what happened against Baltimore, and saying it's fantastic to have Derrick Henry and have him run for 2,000 yards and have him do all this stuff. But when it comes playoff time,
yep,
you need more. You need to be able to do other things. If they're going to load the box, you need to be able to torch them. And if you have two all-pro receivers on either side, then all of a sudden 7-man boxes for Derrick Henry are going to be a thing that we actually see. And from a real football standpoint, make the team a hell of a lot better. So I'm optimistic that even if it's just a regular season thing, they're more open to throwing it and then kind of, maybe get a little more traditional run in. But yeah, I mean, 500, 515, 520, like, am I crazy for thinking that seems realistic?
I have a hard time believing that they're going to increase the amount of passing. I mean, that's not really that drastically, but
yeah, I mean, but 40 attempts. So what over, and the other thing is, so this we're basing these numbers off of 17. We obviously get an extra game.
Oh, that's
so the numbers will go up, but
okay.
I'm talking over like a 17 game sample. Like basically,
I'm glad you said that.
Right, because like obviously if he gets to 500, but he's still, between 15 and 20 in terms of attempts, then nothing's really changed. It's just he's obviously got more attempts, but I think there's room for him to grow, and the volume, the amount of pressure that's put on his shoulders week to week. If it's 2 or 3 extra attempts every single week, that's an easy, 20, 30 attempts. And, I think that's very realistic.
Yeah. I mean, I guess too, you can look at it in terms of the guy who took over the offensive coordinator role has been there for the last 3 years in Todd Downing. So it's not like they're going out and getting somebody who has a completely different kind of scheme. I mean, he'll likely change it up a little bit, but it'll probably be very similar to what they've been running there. So you're going to look at a lot of play action passes, a lot of deep shots off those play action passes, and who better to throw it on those deep shots as Julio Jones and AJ Brown. So I think you're going to see that a lot.
I'm so excited.
Yeah. One thing I did figure out, I did a little bit of research here. Derrick Henry was actually, I think he's like right around 15th or so in terms of 8-man boxes that he actually faced on the regular season. So it's interesting to see how teams are going to try to defend them, because if they even decrease that amount of stacked boxes, I mean, what are we looking at in terms of average yards per game for Henry this year? What was he going to get? 2,400, 2,500?
I think that's a good discussion, because that's not what I'm looking for. That's what I'm looking for. Derrick Henry is my running back one, something that did not happen until the trade. And as a lifelong Derrick Henry doubter, I don't know how to feel about this. But Brian, as you mentioned, fewer 8-man boxes. I expect this offense to be moving the ball up and down the field with the addition of Julio Jones, which means more red zone touches, which means red zone carries, which means touchdowns. outside of an injury, I don't see any way that he doesn't finish as a top 3 running back. And I think he finishes as, top. I think he's in that conversation, and that safety plus that volume plus the likelihood of it being in the red zone and being in dangerous spots against 6 and 7 man boxes. That's just too much for me to put anyone else above them.
Yeah, I can definitely see how you would rank him number one. My only issue with big old Derrick Henry is the fact that his usage in the passing game is just non-existent. I mean, he has yet to catch 20 passes in a season. Yeah. So maybe he'll get there this year with that one extra game, or he'll just be sitting out that week 17. But his limited usage in the passing game, it is quite worrisome when looking at the kind of ceiling that somebody could provide, especially with McCaffrey coming back.
For sure. And we are obviously doing half point PPR. I'll throw up your running backs while I drop a little another nugget. So in full PPR last year per Fantasy Pros, Derrick Henry was your RB3. In half point, he was your RB2, and then I believe in standard, he's number 1. So, if you wanna drop him, like you have him in the top 3, I think that's very reasonable. McCaffrey, I think it's going to be interesting because I think, we didn't see him almost all of last year. Like there's going to be we forget how good Christian McCaffrey can be. And as weird as it is to say, we're both pretty excited about what Sam Darnold could mean for this offense.
Yes, that's gross saying that, but
it's really gross. But if this offense is slightly more efficient, if Darnold is able to move them up and down the field, I think it could be really good for McCaffrey. So I don't fault anyone who puts, and I think at running back, man, it's tough. It's really tough. I think Henry's in the conversation. I think McCaffrey's in the conversation. Dalvin Cook's in conversation. I think Saquon could be the one-on-one for a lot of people. I know it's scary, but his upside plus volume plus involvement on all 3 downs. Like,
let me just say something about Saquon. I wouldn't do it,
but
okay, so as good and as athletic as Saquon Barkley is, and we've seen those flashes that he is an absolute monster.
Yeah,
he reminds me so much of a Barry Sanders type runner where he can make a lot out of nothing, but a lot of times he gets nothing out of a lot.
Trying to make it a lot, yeah.
Yeah, it's like he doesn't just hit the hole for that 6 yards. Instead, he's trying to bounce it outside. He's trying to make that extra cut. And I think that's where he kind of prevents himself from becoming a superstar and becoming that guy that is the number 1 fantasy and best running back in the NFL.
You know who you remind me of when you said that? It was Chris Johnson. After he got his 2,000 yards, he became very much a dancer in the backfield because he wanted that 70-yard explosive play.
Exactly.
I wonder, too, if that will play into the fact, because obviously he's been dealing with injuries, right? So, like, is he going to try and find holes where instead of taking the contact just to stay a little healthier? I don't know, but I think he's in the conversation. And then, what do we do with Alvin Kamara down in New Orleans? Obviously, that's a very interesting conversation. I feel really bad not putting Michael Thomas in my receiver rankings.
Me too.
I might change that because I think in terms of talent, he's in that top 3 or 4 conversation. And as much as Jameis Winston isn't actually a real good quarterback,
he's a fantastic
fantasy purposes. We've seen it in Tampa. He can be absolutely incredible. So Brian McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook, Derrick Henry, Alvin Kamara, and then Zeke. We haven't even hit on him. There's a lot to get into at running back. Zeke looks trim at camp. It's always about the angles. You can make them look like Eddie Lacy or look like they're in the best shape of their life, and it's usually somewhere in between. But Zeke's another very interesting name where if this Dallas offense is rocking and rolling and doing what it does, he should see plenty of quality chances, but it's also a ton of receivers who can catch the ball. They still have Tony Pollard in the mix. So
I think Zeke is probably going to be like out of my top 12. I think he's the most polarizing running back in this
Mhm.
year's fantasy draft because of that. With Dak coming back, we saw what they did those first couple of games. This offense was elite.
Yeah.
And if you're moving the ball at that clip, like how many opportunities is Zeke going to have inside the 5-yard line? And also the fact that coming off that injury, I think we may see a little bit more emphasis on keeping the ball in Zeke's hands down by the goal line and less so of Dak pulling it out. So I think for me, I think Ezekiel Elliott's floor this year is 10 rushing touchdowns. And then we saw him, I mean, even 50 receptions last year. That's a great floor for a dude who this team was abysmal on offense after Dak got injured, and Zeke almost got to 1,000 yards, still scored 6 touchdowns, still averaged 4 yards a carry, which didn't seem like it. And then, he had 330 receiving yards. So I think
I feel like 200, 220 touches is kind of is what we're going to see out of him this season, between the Pollard mix in, between all the receivers, between trying to keep him healthy. But I think he's going to be uber productive with those touches. And I think 14 total touchdowns, 1,200 yards, 1,000 yards. He's going to be super usable. I'm looking at FF Calculator right now at their ADP. McCaffrey, Dalvin, Derrick Henry, Saquon, Alvin Kamara, Jonathan Taylor, Zeke, Nick Chubb, Aaron Jones, Austin Eckler, and Cam Akers and then Antonio Gibson is your 12, which I think is very interesting. Obviously, you have Gibson.
I love Antonio Gibson.
I feel like I'm underrating him a little bit, but it's at the same point. I feel like when people are debating like the NBA All-Star team, it's like, how did this guy not get on there? Well, you can only put so many names on the list.
True.
You have to pick and choose. Was there a name for you that was really hard to leave off?
There's actually 2, and you have one of them at your 10 spot, and that's
Naji Harris, baby. I feel like I'm low on him too.
I had a really hard time leaving him out. I honestly, in my rankings, I really think that Austin Eckler is the guy at the back end of the top 12 who can really kind of compete for a top 5 role if we expect Justin Herbert to take that leap and we expect Austin Eckler to maintain, the 10 targets that he was getting.
I don't know that we can do that. I don't know if Phillip Rivers was still there, then sure. But I don't know. Like for Justin,
Anthony Lynn's gone too, so we won't get the ridiculous usage out of the running back room. And then the other guy who last year you and I were both completely out on. I've seen multiple other people mention this. That's Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
Yeah.
Nobody's talking about the dude who's going to be the RB1 for the best quarterback in the NFL, who has potentially the best wide receiver in the NFL, my number 1 ranked wide receiver, Tyreek Hill, the best tight end in the NFL, and Travis Kelce. So who the hell's going to get the ball out of the backfield other than Clyde Edwards-Helaire?
We've talked about this before, Brian. If we like the receiver and we like the tight end and we like the quarterback and they're all among the top 3 at each position,
yes,
the running back's going to see volume. He's going to see work.
Damian Williams is gone. We don't. I mean, he didn't play last year, but Le'Veon Bell is.
Yeah, no. I mean, it's. I know CEH had some ugly moments at the goal line and that kind of stuff, but yeah, he's definitely someone. I mean, we've talked about this a little bit, kind of off air, but at running back, as hard as it is, as much as we may like some player, it's all about volume and touches and quality, and if somebody's getting 250 to 300 touches and another guy there's a couple names that I'm starting to get more pessimistic, one including J.K. Dobbins, who, as much as I loved him coming out of Ohio State, as much as I think he can be a dynamic force in that Ravens offense, if he's 175 touches instead of 250, he's just not going to be a top 12 running back. That's how it works. And the fact that they gave Gus Edwards that extension plus Lamar, plus I think they throw it a little bit more. I have my pessimism about him. Miles Sanders is the toughest for me to rank because from a talent standpoint, as much as I like him, I could put him in my top 5 very easily. I could also leave him out of my top 12 because he's going to be in a part-time role.
Not just part-time role, but what are we going to see out of this offense now, clearly under the helm of Jalen Hurts?
I think Jalen Hurts is a top 5-6 option at quarterback. I think the Eagles fly, and that's why I want to be excited about Miles Sanders. I like Dallas Goedert. I like what they're doing with the receivers. I'm buying in on Jalen Hurts.
I mean, this could be my Cowboys fanhood coming out, but I'm definitely not to that extent. Like
yeah,
I'm
and
not that
it may
excited.
be crazy. And in terms of an actual talent, I don't know that I love Jalen Hurts long term, but I could definitely see a 3-year window where he's incredibly important for fantasy, makes the Eagles fun to watch, and kind of does some stuff, and then in the meantime they draft the quarterback of their future and kind of go in that route. But
Well, they just get BDN back, and
yeah, well, I mean, I don't know, third time's the charm there, but we'll see. um Speaking of quarterbacks, are you planning on moving Ryan Tannehill at all in your rankings?
so I have Tannehill sliding in just behind Stafford as the 12th ranked guy. Tannehill has always been, I mean, for the past 3 years since I started touting him as the backup of Marcus Mariota and claiming that he was the better suited guy to lead that team, and that came to fruition. So Tennessee should be kind of, giving me some props here. It's just hard to know how much we talked about this is the volume of passing and how many times at the goal line is he going to be snaked by Derrick Henry or vice. I mean, you saw at the end of the year last year, Derrick Henry got sniped 3 or 4 times by Ryan Tannehill on rollout. So I just don't think that the volume in the passing game is consistent enough for me to rank him in that like top tier or the beginning of the second tier.
Yeah, I feel like I want to rank him higher. I'm trying to not let my biases come out, but as you mentioned, he is a guy that utilizes his legs, especially when they get in close. Very much like Dak Prescott. He had 4 touchdowns in 2019 rushing. He had 7 last year. I don't know that I expect 7, but 5 or 6 feels very reasonable. I think they throw more. I think between Julio and AJ Brown, he's north of 500 attempts. I think he's incredibly reliable, and I think he's a guy that gets in that top 7-8 range. And we'll see what happens. But like with Deshaun Watson, Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert, Hurts, Aaron Rodgers, Ryan Tannehill, like those guys are all pretty interchangeable for me. And I would not blame anybody. And I'm looking at it now, like we're going to be low on somebody. Like we can't just be high on everybody. And Lamar Jackson's one of those names that I've seen people go, how are you not ranking him top 5? And other people, how do you rank him in your top 10? Like, he's going to, obviously we talked polarizing options with Hurts, with Lamar Jackson. If you missed that, go check that out. We'll see what happens with Deshaun Watson and Aaron Rodgers for that matter. We're ranking them now as if they're starting, and we're going to go from there. But we'll adjust as we see. And then obviously Kyler's incredibly interesting. And then Russell Wilson, like what we saw the first half of last year was holy shit. They opened up the offense and let him throw there. He's got DK and he's got Tyler Lockett, and this is awesome. And then as the season went along, the Brian Schottenheimer got real tight, and handoff. And his production went down. So do we rank him like we saw at the end of the year? Because then in that case, I don't mind dropping. Like right now, I have him QB4, and that's probably too high if that's the offense we're going to see. But if we're going to see that first half of the season offense from Russell Wilson, then I need to have him up in my top 5. So it's really a challenge. And I think I really like having these conversations now.
And that's what I was going to say. That's why these are like the baseline of the rankings. And then as camps go on and we start to get better idea of what the offenses are going to look like, that's how you really start to make the adjustments for the upcoming year. And I think I just wanted to hit on the Titans again. I mean, might as well just call this the Tennessee Titan podcast.
I mean, that's what it is. Julio Jones is a Tennessee Titan. I'm very excited as a Titan fan, but it's affecting all the positions. Like, what do we do with Calvin Ridley? What do we do with Matt Ryan? What do we do with Ryan Tannehill? So, like, obviously, these are the conversations we need to have.
The 2 people that we did not mention, I think, who benefit the most from this deal, and you can get, if you're drafting like right now for best balls or anything like that, you get extreme discount probably near the end. Josh Reynolds, Julio can't stay healthy. So he went from being a wide receiver 2 to a wide receiver 3 in an offense that doesn't really utilize 3 wide receiver sets, but an offense that also saw Adam Humphries catch like 4 touchdowns last year on big plays. Reynolds can do that. And our boy Hayden Hurst. Everyone is all up in arms about Kyle Pitts right now, which I do not see them lining up him in line as a traditional tight end set, especially getting rid of Julio Jones. He's going to be split out. He's going to be utilized for his size. Hayden Hurst is going to be on the field still for 95% of the snaps, and he will be the best option down the middle of the field in the seam.
Yeah, I think that could be a fun offense to watch in terms of they use a lot of 2 tight end sets with
Calvin Ridley. Arthur Smith too.
Arthur Smith utilize the hell out of that with Jonnu Smith and Ferkser and all those guys in Tennessee. I'm 100% with you there. And I think there could be a lot of nice value for Hayden Hurst, and you could get him as your 2 or 3. By the way, if you're looking to do best balls, non-spawn, I started up for Underdog Fantasy. And I've done a couple best balls over there. They're really fun. The app is really, really smooth. And if they want to sponsor the pod, I'd be happy to be a shill for them. And check that out. But those are always fun to do. There, obviously you can win some money come season's end, and it's really good for your draft prep to kind of see how you like your team and give yourself some real. So sometimes you get in these mock draft lobbies, and somebody's like, oh, I'm going to take a kicker in the first round just to mess with everybody's ADP and be real obnoxious. All right, Brian, I have 2 questions for you, and then we'll get out of here. The running back that did not make your top 12 that has the most likelihood to make your top 12 when we're talking next month.
That's got to be Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
Yeah.
I think the offense he's in and the opportunity share.
Yeah, I think that's a great call. Antonio Gibson makes that short list for me. DeAndre Swift, somebody I don't know what to do with, and maybe we could do a show talking about some tough guys because Dan Campbell and the aforementioned Anthony Lynn. I feel like we're going to see a lot of Jamal Williams, and I'm going to be adding him in best ball leagues.
I love Jamal Williams, but he's not DeAndre Swift.
No, he's not. But if the coaches think he's going to if they're going to give him 200 touches, then he's going to be valuable. Yeah. Among receivers, who's the name that didn't make your list that you think come next month we're talking about running backs or among receiver? You think, oh, this guy could be in the mix.
Man, I think for me, man, that's really tough.
Receiver. By the way,
let's go back to Michael Thomas. For instance,
I love it.
Because we saw Jameis Winston support both Chris Godwin and Mike Evans in Tampa Bay, albeit a Bruce Arians style, air it all out offense. But the pieces are still there in New Orleans, and if he gets the starting gig, as I think he will. I think he's best suited as the quarterback, and Taysom Hill still the utility knife. Yeah. Jameis can do it in a fantasy perspective, and then who's going to catch the ball from him? It's going to be Michael Thomas. So,
yeah, no, I'm 100% with you there. Among receivers for me, I think Amari Cooper is definitely in that conversation.
Yes, sir.
Okay, no. That's why it's all messed up. My receivers are all messed up. Ignore that. Sorry, folks, if I had some confusion. I don't think Naji Harris is going to be a fantasy wide receiver.
If they use him like Le'Veon Bell, he might be.
Right. But I'm just looking at that like end of the third into the early fifth. Like there's so much value at receiver. Now it's gonna be really tempting to just go running back heavy and then grab a few names there, but that's not how I roll. But Terry McLaurin, Julio Jones, Mike Evans, Amari Cooper, Robert Woods, Chris Godwin, CeeDee Lamb, Adam Thielen, Kenny Golladay, Cooper Kupp, Deontay Johnson. That's like your late third all the way to mid fifth. There's so many really
DJ
compelling names. Yeah.
No more Curtis Samuel.
Brandon Ayuk, Tyler Lockett, Odell Beckham's, top of the sixth.
I really feel like wide receiver has almost become it's so saturated with the amount of guys that produce points that I think we're getting back to the origination of fantasy football where it was very running back dependent, because the NFL has transitioned to a 7-on-7 league. So
That's
every
why
team is
I'm
utilizing
pivoting,
3 wide receivers.
Brian, and that's why I'm doing 0 RB, or my favorite strategy. You get one workhorse early, and I like getting Kelsey in round 1, so maybe that is round 2. You get a workhorse that you trust with your first pick, and then load up on pass catchers, and then come back in the later rounds and grab some running backs that you like, grab some guys that have upside. I did that in a best ball last night, and I absolutely love my team, including Gus Edwards, including Alexander Madison, including that's all I can pull out of my head right now.
You got a guy like Darrell Henderson still in LA behind Cam Akers. We don't know if that's going to be a rotation. So
yeah, no, there's James White in Tampa Bay is practically free. We'll see what happens there. You can grab. We're going to be talking with Jared Smola on Monday about these nasty backfields. We're going to talk Baltimore. We're going to talk Houston. Houston has 3 names that you could potentially grab. You grab Philip Lindsay. You could grab David Johnson.
That situation
go
is
to Arizona and get. I really like Chase Edmonds. We'll see what James Conner does there. Chase Edmonds in round 5. I'm really really happy about. Latavius in round 9. If New Orleans is like, you know what, we're gonna have Michael Thomas, we're gonna have Traquan, and we're gonna have we're gonna have Alvin as our pass catchers, and we're gonna have Latavius as more of the running back. We'll see what Buffalo does. Zach Moss is just floating around in round 9. Tony Pollard in round 9. Travis Etienne in round 9. Jamal Williams in round 9. Like, there's some names there that if you want to be patient. And kind of be a little different and just load up on those badass receivers. I don't fault you one bit, and that's why you should try some best ball. You should also try our friends over at Monkey Knife Fight. It's the DFS site that you should be using that you're probably not. Use our promo code Fake Pigskin. You get 100% match bonus plus a $5 entry. And it's super cool. It's like prop bets. If you want to dip your toe into the sports gambling landscape, you can pick some over unders. You can pick some, which quarterback will throw more yards. But you can also do it now for baseball, for basketball, for hockey,
NASCAR.
Brian and I will hopefully have some content coming to fakepigskin.com very very soon. Brian, this went a little longer than we liked, but it was a really good discussion, I think, and.
Once you start talking, it just starts rolling.
Yeah, I mean, you get me talking Titans, it's all over. So, for Brian Twining, I'm Kyle Robert, and we'll talk to y'all next time.